What's going on, everybody? I am Winston A. Marshall, aka the Swaggy Blurred, and this is my episode 5 review of X-Men 97. Before we get started, a couple of things. If you are not a member of this channel already, if you don't already subscribe to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And be sure to hit that notification bell so you get notified of all the newest content that I'm putting out on the channel. I'm building a lot of stuff out right now, so I would appreciate your subscription, man, and to come back and check the stuff out. Let me know how you feel about it. As I mentioned, this is a spoiler review, and this so far is the episode that is probably the most heavy, the most traumatizing, that moves the story along probably the most, period. So if you have not seen it, please go and watch it first. And I'm gonna give you some tips of some other stuff to watch before this too. Be sure that you watch the episode called Nightcrawler. I want to say that's in season 3 or 4 of the original series. Be sure you watch the episode, I want to say it's episode like 5. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's where Jubilee, Storm, and Gambit go to Genosha. And then the season 1 finale of X-Men the Animated Series with Master Mold, as well as the episode Courage, and episode either 3 or 4, season 3 or 4 of it, which covers some more there's just a lot of stuff. I would watch all of those episodes. Now, that being said, this is a very, very heavy episode, and a lot of X-Men 97, a lot of that has to do with the simple fact of we are adapting a very well-known storyline of X-Men. For those that are not familiar, this is a adapted version of E for Extinction, which happened in 2001. And again, spoiler alert. In that storyline, we actually saw the death of 16 million mutants on Genosha. You ultimately see a wild Sentinel attack that comes in and just massacres what had become the sovereign nation of Genosha. And not to be outdone at this point, having covered so many different storylines and made it their own, X-Men 97 gave us their own version of this. So I'm just going to go through it super quick. I'm going to try and be quick about it so I can talk about more about the stuff that I really enjoyed about it. So up top during the intro, you actually got a little tease that both Cable was going to be in this, as well as Gambit and Rogue's love story was going to be covered, as well as Nightcrawler and Gambit fighting together on Genosha. You can see that that's the Genosha building back there. So that was really cool to see that they're using that now to really kind of drive stuff home. They are using the intro to tip their hat as to what you can see. For those that are like Rick and Morty fans, it's something that happens. There's some stuff that is like permanent staples in the intro, and then some stuff that lets you know of some adventures you might see in this particular season. So in this particular episode, we got a little bit of a tease of that. Now, what's going on is that Genosha has officially opened as a sovereign nation. They are allowing mutants from anywhere around the world to come and live on Genosha. And they are welcoming the X-Men and Magneto. Again, another Magneto. Instead of Magneto was right, when Magneto is right, which, very quick story. Again, spoiler, so if you're watching this, you've already seen it. The E for Extinction, the Genosha massacres, where we, if I remember correctly, is where we ultimately get the Magneto was right phrase from, because Magneto had been warning that humans were going to do some wild shit and try and kill them. I could be wrong. I might be confusing with House of M. My point is, it's one of these massacres in particular that spurs on the Magneto was right scenario. And so to tip our hat to it again in the very next episode is pretty cool. When we get there, we find out that Madeline Pryor is actually working with the Genoshan government as a liaison. They wanted to have you know, someone that was close to the X-Men, since that was Charles Xavier's dream to be there, and she's there. And we also find out that Nightcrawler has already appeared on the island, and he reconnects with Gambit and Rogue. So the reason I said check out the Nightcrawler episode is because Nightcrawler is actually introduced to Wolverine, Gambit, and Rogue in that episode. So it makes perfect sense that he would recognize them, and it's a nice connection to have them all come back together. I really, really love that. So Magneto needs to be talked to in private with Madeline. So he goes off, and while that happens, you get Gambit, Rogue, and Nightcrawler exploring the town like this.
Everything around us would not have been possible without the work of the X-Men.
Oh my, it's just like he said it'd be.
Who? The professor?
Yeah, sure. Always used to say we'd have a place all our own one day.
More than a place. A home.
Daddy's charging pretty high rent.
Birthing a nation overnight is not without its share of stumbles.
Ignore him, so I can't help but ruin honey.
Or maybe Gambit's willing to ask questions no one else will.
So just seeing that, you know, you already have people a little on edge about Genosha, but it does seem like a general paradise for mutants. Meanwhile, while that's happening, back at home base, you've got Jean still trying to put together her life, and the X-Men are actually in the middle of an interview as humans get to know mutants that, you know, aren't as bad as the world makes them out to be. While this is happening, you see Jean. She's hanging out by the lake on the compound, and she's trying to piece together her memories. You know, it's, you know, his eyes that made me stay. There's this really cute story about she uses her telekinesis, but amplified from the Phoenix, in order to block his optic blast, which allows her to then see his eyes for real. Very cute moment. And as I continue to talk, you know, Logan just mentions, you know, that, well, there's only one of you, Jeannie, because Jean is talking about how she can't sort out what was Madeline and what was her, and it makes her blush, and she ends up kissing Logan, and you can see she's still blushing, and Logan is so confused, and all he can say is, you know, there's Scott Summers and Jean Grey, that's the rules, them's the rules, and he's just real sad about it. Now, simultaneously, while this is happening, Scott loses it in an interview, because he gets asked questions about his son, which he's still very sensitive about, and so he blows up, and he goes, you know, I have to summon these questions to prove that I'm a person to you. And thank God that I'm not you. I'm not normal like you, because that's the only reason that you people are still alive. Which, whoo, Scott is about to probably end up in his villain era. The way that we're moving throughout this, there's a number of instances. It typically happens a little later. So like the main time that you had the turn of Cyclops was Avengers versus X-Men, but after what happens at the end of this episode, I would not be surprised if he starts going pretty vindictive. I mean, you would hope not, because obviously you're trying to keep the X-Men together and whatnot, but I would not put it past him. And essentially what he said the only reason that you are allowed to have me just sit here and humble myself before you is because I'm not as shitty and low down as you are. I have self-control. I don't move on fear, and I think that that's huge. And I think I talked about in the other episode, the second one, about how it was Scott that wasn't just murdering the Executioner, because he could have opened his eyes and that would have been it. The Executioner stole his visor, and Scott showed restraint. And this is kind of what he's saying right now, is the way mutants are persecuted by humans, because I have to prove every day that I'm a person, that I'm just like you. It's my mercy that's allowing you to live. And that is a intense sentiment, but it's one that I know a lot of people that feel oppressed, that they don't fight back. They don't make it a bigger issue. And if they do, they do it peacefully, and not in like any sort of like kind of, you know, warring type of way. So as we continue to go along, we find out that the Council of Genosha consists of Emma Frost, Sebastian Shaw, Madeline Pryor, Moira McTaggart, Banshee, and Callisto from the Morlocks. So a very eclectic group, and they thought that the only person that could potentially lead is Magneto, and Magneto's like, I don't want to do that. I'm not interested. And then he, as they talk him down, he does give a quote that he got from Charles, saying that Charles said to Magneto, any dream worth having is a dream worth dying for, which I feel is both a a nod obviously to what Charles died for trying to bring, but also a nod about the shit that's about to go the fuck down. Like, the foreshadowing in the show is absolutely crazy. So Magneto agrees under one rule. The only way that he will rule Genosha is if Rogue rules by his side, which we're going to get more into that in just a second. But while this is happening, you think Scott's having this really sweet moment with Jean, when in actuality, Scott and Madeline are essentially mind fucking on the astral plane, and the original Jean finds out, and she is pissed. She shows up and she is not here for it. And there's a really funny, sassy ass moment where you see Madeline get caught, and they were like, yo, where were you at? She's like, oh, sorry, I was daydreaming. And Emma was like, I know what you were daydreaming about, because Emma saw the whole thing. I was like, yo, come on, girl. You just stay out of their business. So either way, you eventually get Rogue telling Gambit about their affair, and like you get these little intimate moments of when Rogue was young with Magnus, getting painted by her, like, draw me like one of your French girls and shit. And Gambit's hearing it out, but you can see a lot of the cards he's throwing into the fire are cards of hearts, and very specifically, he always considers Rogue his Queen of Hearts. And this is the last card he throws in, and he burns, because essentially she lets him go. She says, you light up everything you touch, just not me, just not my heart. And that is where Gambit says, that's fine, then we can just be friends. Which that made me sad, because to me, that is the strongest couple in the X-Men, at least from what I remember. I mean, sure, Scott and Jean, I guess, whatever, who cares, like, boring. The two of them, Gambit and Rogue, not only have some of the best personality. Gambit loves this woman so much, and he doesn't care. This is one of those situations where, like, if you're with somebody and they have something, like, maybe, they're like a criminal, they're a former criminal, which ironically both of these people were. Maybe they have some sort of physical defect, and so they feel very self-conscious about it, and it's like, none of that matters. I love who you are. I love who you are as a person. And Rogue has the ultimate affliction. We have a number of storylines where she tries to get rid of her powers, including in this series of shows. In the original animated series, she goes and almost ends up Apocalypse's slave trying to get rid of her powers. So they just have a very beautiful relationship. So it's sad to see that this is, the end of it here. Again, Rogue being the Queen of Hearts, being Gambit's heart, gets thrown into the fire. Again, this is a spoiler review. A little bit more fucking foreshadowing. So ultimately, we get to a ball that's happening, and this is where I kind of feel you're getting a little bit of reference to Krakoa, because I don't remember a gala happening in the E for Extinction event. I could be wrong. I haven't read it in a long time. But you get this gala, and the woman, the UN secretary, comes in, and she's just like, yo, most other nations don't allow a terrorist to be their leader. And Magneto counters with, and yet so many allowed their leaders to be terrorists. That's a bar. Look, I'm not going to get into politics and human history, but there have been a number of times throughout society, both in the past and in the present, and from a number of different places, where the leaders of countries do horrendous things. If you don't know what I'm talking about, again, go study your history books. I'm not going to get into that right now. But what I will say is that was very much a bar. And I love that the mutants continue to say back to folks all the time, that there's a lot of stuff kind of going on that y'all are allowing to happen to us, and we're just trying to live our lives. And I appreciate that the mutants are speaking up on that. That's what's going on to them. That they're being vocal about the mistreatment. So all of a sudden you get Rogue and Magneto fly dancing, and Gambit's just sitting there kind of watching it. And then all of a sudden they're kind of, you know, he's stuck in between them essentially, but they're touching and everything. But this is actually a really great symbol just because their hands do eventually touch. But the fact that he is the one that's in between them, because right after, Rogue and Magneto kiss in front of everybody, but ultimately she says, you know what, it is true that some things are more than skin deep, and Rogue essentially says goodbye to Eric, and she's chosen Gambit. She wants to be with her real man, even if they can't ever touch. So I thought that was a really touching moment, that they would have a second chance of what's going on. Now, this is something, I didn't get a photo of this, and I apologize, but if you go to around the 20-minute marker, I want to say right before the gala starts, or right after this moment I just talked about, if you look in the far left-hand corner, there's the Watcher. Now, for those that aren't familiar with who the Watcher is, his whole thing is to literally watch the various universes and what happens and in each of them, but he's not supposed to interfere. And the only time we've really been introduced to him in the course of Marvel, for like the MCU, Marvel animation, and this iteration, has been in What If. So this is another universe that the Watcher is paying attention to, and you know that something's about to go down, because he sees everything, but he only kind of just shows up when crazy shit's going on. So that was a fun little Easter egg to kind of tip our hat to what's going on. And so Madeline ends up with the nosebleed, and you can't tell if it's because maybe her connection got severed with Scott, or if Jean's attacking her again, or what, but most likely it's something a little more intense. And that's what we end up finding out, is that Cable has arrived, and he's just like, oh my god, everybody get out of here. And he ends up meeting his mom, and he tries to say he's coming, and she's like, who's coming, what's going on? And all he can say is, I'm so sorry, Mom. And then he gets body slid out because of his computer out of there. And again, this is one more time that this impending massacre there was a small warning, but by then it was too late. Here comes this crazy looking master mold, kind of like three-headed contraption that's dropping sentinels out left and right, and you just see people getting literally slaughtered, just blown the F away. And Nightcrawler barely saves his sister and Gambit, and she goes to help but can't really. And then Magneto is fighting this thing on his own to protect some of the Morlocks. There's an incredible set of action sequences with Gambit and Rogue getting through some Sentinels to go and save the Morlocks and everything. But ultimately, this Master Mold contraption senses that there's an Omega level threat and unloads on Magneto, who's doing too much at once. He's holding Rogue back with and Gambit back with metal bars. He's protecting himself and the Morlocks and trying to attack. And so ultimately, the Omega threat is eliminated, and we are to believe that Magneto is now dead. So finally, Rogue gets super pissed, and she tries to do it, and Gambit then gets in the mix, and he's doing a pretty damn good job, but he ultimately gets stabbed. And it's pretty bad. He is being held up by this thing, and that's kind of it. But that's where Gambit's final Gambit comes in. Remember, anything he touches, he can light up. And this thing is lodged in his body, so he is able to fully ignite the Master Mold. And then he goes out with the coldest fucking line that we have heard in a long time. He goes, "The name is Gambit. Remember it." My guy blows up the Master Mold by himself, man. And when it's all said and done, you see Rogue going to him, and then you get one of the saddest lines that we've heard in recent memory of "I can't feel you" just over a black screen. Oof. All right, look. I still think that the previous episode is very good, but now, based upon watching this, I'm actually going to retroactively pull that down. I'm going to pull that down just a few points. We'll put it at like a 4.7. This is a 5. This is a perfect 5. You hit every feel. They did such a good job of layering foreshadowing. So anybody that, say, for example, doesn't know about this storyline that's being adapted and whatnot, once you watch it the first time, go back and look at all the little hints from a writer standpoint that this is where we were going. The death, the burning up, the destruction of relationships, things like that. Again, if you know about the Magneto was right slogan, to see Magneto is right when he shows up at the welcome part, there's just too many signs that this all was coming. That being said, I think some of the emotional connection with this stuff, Jean being confused and bringing Logan into it, and Scott feeling like a failure of a father, but then also standing up for mutants, you know, the love triangle of Jean, Madeline, and Scott, let alone the love triangle of Rogue, Gambit, and Magneto, and how that all plays out. It's just such good storytelling. It's such good writing. And then to layer that with something that is so dark and so heavy, and, you know, really rings true to just crazy things, crazy things that we have been seeing almost in repeat. I mean, like over the last couple of decades, some group of people, some nation just deciding that it's okay to just completely blow away their enemies because they don't like them. And it's one of those things that just, it fucks with you. It really does. And so I am very proud of this writing team and this team that made this show to be able to talk on serious issues of all different levels, to start a conversation of what that looks like. Good art, good media is supposed to be able to make you really think, feel, and ultimately talk to one another. And we all know that this episode is gonna have people, like, I'm not sleeping right now. I should have gone to sleep and recorded this in the morning. It's like 3 a.m. right now. I had to just get it out because it was all just weighing on me, let alone to lose my favorite X-Men in Gambit. It was a lot for me. So I want to know what you think. How did you feel about this episode? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Where do you think this is going? I have a prediction. I actually think, because of what the E for Extinction line is, we're gonna get Cassandra Nova, which is, for those who don't know, Charles' evil sister. Go look it up. It's a very interesting storyline, and it might lead into how we eventually get Charles back, because remember, Charles didn't die per se at the end of the series. It was that Lalandra came to take him away. The princess or the queen, empress now of the Shi'ar, took him away to try and keep him alive. So maybe this is like around the time, because of Cassandra, we get Charles back in some way. The Shi'ar have come up with a solution. But yeah, let me know, man. Let me know what you feel in the comments. Please, please leave a like. I would appreciate that. And again, if you haven't already, subscribed to the channel, hit that notification bell so you know when all the content is out. My Joker Folly Ado trailer reaction should be out by now as well. If you don't already know, come check me out over at Capes and Cows with Christian Harloff and Koi Jeandrew on Fridays on the Christian Harloff channel. And for those that have been fans for a while, or if you're new, there's a show I used to do called Blurs in the Hood with Mr. Jay Washington. He is a stand-up comedian, online presence, all that good stuff. Show ended. We are doing a one-night-only reunion on April 16th. That is, this should be out on a Wednesday. So 6 days from now, that will be coming out. You don't want to miss it. Twitch.tv/Blurs in the Hood. We might also put it on our YouTube channel. I believe we still have our Blurs in the Hood YouTube channel, so you don't want to miss this one night only event, man. It's going to be absolutely fucking crazy. I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point as well. And that is everything that I got going on right now. So again, I want to thank you so much for coming and checking this out. Whew, I'm gonna need a shot after this. And with that, y'all, I'm gonna take off and get out of here. Peace.